because now it's talent on this thing, so you can recal it over here. And okay, I love puzzle games. Okay, it's totally cool. If you haven't been around here, a lot of I'm apparently missed something. I'm getting so I can speculate with the rest of you. I don't know. Something like that.
Any chance we could have cancelled this one as well? As many of you know, Ubisoft Massive recently held its Elite Task Force Echo, so I thought that this would be the perfect moment for me to put forward the suggestions that I think should have been burning issues at the top of the agenda at the ETF. I wanted to share my observations and insights into this franchise, and my advice for improving this game. For those of you unfamiliar with the procedure, the ETF is an attempt by Ubisoft to drag a gaggle of content creators, and a couple of real people, up to head office, ply them with compliments, attention and free merchandise, and try and convince this merry band that all the ideas they're restricted to talking about is actually a debate led by them, and fool them into thinking that they had a chance in hell of controlling the agenda. The theory is that Ubisoft create the impression that influential members of the community were invited to head office, they listened to their ideas, and then Ubisoft acted on the requests of the community. The sad reality is that most of the people there are going to get some mouse mats, t-shirts, and channel promotion. The people who went there and tried their absolute best to push Ubisoft into making significant improvements to the game will likely only get to add a quick buff to work that was already close to completion. I am friends with some of the people who have attended past and present, and whilst I have absolute faith in their motives, good character and determination to produce genuine positive improvement in the franchise, I have zero faith that Ubisoft will put their hand in their grubby pocket and produce anything beyond what is already in the pipeline, and certainly won't be spending extra cash based on the suggestions of genuinely well-intentioned ETF members. Let's be honest here. To some degree, holding Elite Task Force Echo was an act of gross stupidity, demonstrating a complete lack of understanding of the temperature of the Division community. After all, the community has been communicating their concerns to Ubisoft Massive very vocally, despite the aggressive attempts of the forums and subreddit to silence critics. Right now, the problem is not communication. The problem is that there is absolutely no action. So suddenly turning around and arranging a little chat at the Malmo studio instead of actually doing some fucking work, frankly, has been interpreted by the community as too little too late, a publicity stunt, a stalling tactic, a smokescreen, insulting, disingenuous, out of touch, cynical, dishonest, idiotic, a sham, a substitute for action, an attempt to shift blame onto the community, a symptom of failed management, evasive, inconceivably inappropriate, pathetic, and an absolute waste of fucking time. I myself would struggle to describe the current situation as sympathetically as that. Calling an ETF right now is like a doctor in accident and emergency coming up to you for the 5th time whilst you sit there with your severed bloody hand in a bag of ice and asking, yet again, do you mind if I take a look at that to see if I can figure out what's wrong? Look, if Ubisoft hasn't sewn the hand back on by now, asking us for a 6th time what the problem is will not achieve jack shit. I don't have any faith in the ETF process. Personally, I think it's a PR stunt disguised as a talking shop where Ubisoft Massive blows smoke up the arses of the attendees on such an industrial level that it comes out of their faces like Brad Pitt in True Romance. Meanwhile, they will fluff off the more commercially minded streamers and YouTubers in the back room and simply offer them channel promotion in exchange for showing enthusiasm for whatever token changes they introduce. And I say token for a good reason, because a lot of the stuff that will be described as a product of the ETF was decided before the ETF invites even went out. But community developers and PR proxies are always saying, there's no point complaining about the problems if you're not going to suggest any solutions. And that is a very pertinent point, mainly because my response these days is, there's no point complaining about me complaining and then demanding I fix your fucking broken ass game. You see, the video game company is the only fucker getting paid money in this equation, so why the fuck are they telling me to fix their product when I'm the one doing the fucking paying? They are the ones not doing the job they have already been paid for, and most importantly, they don't fucking listen to me anyway. But since we're at a crossroads here, where the game might completely collapse into failure, or completely finish collapsing into utter failure, I realise that perhaps it's time that I put forward my ideas for saving the franchise, and giving the players the game that they deserve. And when I say deserve, I mean paid for already. So, I've decided on this occasion, in the interests of the Division community and the Division franchise, to abandon my normal strident and hyperbolic approach, and for the benefit of the Division and my fellow players, adopt a more diplomatic, constructive and conciliatory tone, in the genuine hope that the community managers at least try to keep an open mind and at least consider the merits of my genuinely thoughtful and carefully crafted suggestions for the improvement of this franchise. Suggestion number 1. Sack all of the community managers and the whole of the fucking public relations department. Fuck them all off on a cattle truck for all I fucking care. Seriously, sack every last one of them and get them jobs working in child social care facilities specialising in kids with gambling addiction. On the rare occasions these goons can actually be bothered to drag their asses into the studio to burble at the cameras in State of the Game, they spend half of the time peddling fucking microtransactions and pedo caches. They dossed out on 5 State of the Games in a row. There's been no State of the Game for 6 weeks straight. If they do show up, they bullshit about listening to the players and about having important conversations about stuff that they immediately ignore. In fact, the only area where the game is delivering right now is the pedo caches. It's the most reliable and fully functioning part of the Division 2. Let that sink in. The only consistently delivered new content for this game that arrives on time and works just fucking peachy is the microtransactions. Public relations don't benefit the players or the game. They benefit the shareholder. I would go further and say that since PR destroys the honest feedback loop between product quality and customer feedback and complaint, public relations actually damages the game. In the idealised version of capitalism we get taught at school, we get told about a baker in a village, and if another bakery opens that makes nicer bread, then in capitalism the villagers are free to buy bread from the other guy. It's the invisible hand of the market, and free market capitalism. Well, nobody mentioned anything about a bunch of public relations guys turning up in the village and putting the old baker out of fucking business by paying people to pretend to throw up outside the baker's and pretend to have food poisoning and spread rumours that people who don't shop at the new baker's are toxic and to call the police on the people that complain that the PR guys are lying. I'm pretty sure that example I just gave you was more racketeering than capitalism. But it's certainly a more accurate description of the kinds of capitalism we see AAA publishers engaged in today. As customers, it's our right to choose the best product and demand recompense and compensation if we do not get what we paid for. Community managers and PR guys just impede that, and they conflict with consumer rights. They are professional liars who mostly just manipulate gaming communities, shit-stir members of that community into attacking critics, and deceive people about the condition of the product. It's a deception that harms the consumer by making it almost impossible to make an informed choice. Games should succeed or fail based on the quality of the games, not because of the quality of the lies PR guys spread about them. I know some people hearing this suggestion might consider it to be a little on the harsh side, but you're wrong. It's not. No, really, you're just plain wrong. Get rid of the fucking lot of them and spend the money on developers. You know, the real actual workers that do real actual work and might actually stand a fucking chance of fixing some of the problems. Get rid of the wank contracts. Non-disclosure agreements, losing your right to a refund if you install, losing the right to a refund if you play the fucking beta. Yeah, think about that. You get to try out the game in the beta to see if you want to buy it. But if it's a pile of fuck, it's too late, because you have to fucking buy it. If your player contracts are so long and convoluted that gamers need fucking lawyers to understand them, you are doing it wrong. Ubisoft's customers are not taking out a 25-year mortgage or buying indemnity insurance for a major fucking hospital. If someone is buying a £100 video game, the contract should not expose us to litigation. These contracts technically contradict consumer regulations in many territories, but to launch the game you frequently volunteer to blockade those rights behind arbitration, so you can't technically take them to court. This shit doesn't fly in some countries like Finland, where consumer law trumps unfair contracts every time. And let's be honest here, I reckon more than half the Division 2 players would have requested a refund within the first 2 months if they could. I know some are getting refunded by Amazon if they bought physical copies. Amazon.com knows this game is broke as fuck, and they're giving people their refunds. Then again, so do many developers at Ubisoft Massive. That's why so many of them are looking for new jobs at the moment. Yeah, I said it. Never tell your players you can't do something ever again, ever. Personally, I think it's fucking hysterical that community managers hide behind excuses when they're asked to fix things. Oh, that's not sustainable. There's no easy fix for that. That's unrealistic. It's a problem with the way the game is made. They have an endless list of wonderful and fictional reasons why they don't do stuff. But really, they are all code for, we are not prepared to spend money to fix it. Just imagine if the United Nations contacted Ubisoft and said, aliens just landed and they really love the Division 2, but they said if we can't fix all the bugs, hit registration problems and fucky loot drops, they're going to get pissed off and vaporise the planet. If the fate of the fucking planet was dependent on Ubisoft unfucking the situation, what do you think would really happen? They would have their shit wired together perfectly inside 3 months. If their very fucking existence depended on fixing this game, they would go to their vast bank account full of our money, take some out, grab some competent managers from Paris and go and pay people to fix this shit. Ubisoft uses many coded phrases which all ultimately mean the same thing. They won't fix stuff because they are miserly, profiteering and disorganised. And it's frankly easier and cheaper to wheel out a couple of goons to lie to the customers and placate them on state of the game. This is all a matter of will. If they really wanted to fix things, they would now be fixed. Ubisoft has 16,000 employees, a multi-billion-dollar yearly revenue, and they have approximately 2,805 million euros of listed assets. They have the fucking resources. They have the fucking resources to end hunger in several African nations and still make a profit. But instead decided to give a paltry €500,000 to help repair the Notre Dame Cathedral. Yeah, they can piss away €500,000 to the 19th richest country on the planet to repair a cathedral that was going to get repaired anyway. Why? Because it's a cracking publicity stunt. That's why. Maybe it's about time they started getting some good publicity by fixing their fucking products. They need to stop making excuses. Less talky, more fixy. Get rid of all the in-game microtransactions. It's insulting and brings Ubisoft into disrepute when they release a broke-ass game but pack it full of time-limited kiddie gambling boxes. Seriously, consider the absolute level of piss-taking involved here. The game is a broken pile of fuck. The loot system has been broken for 6 months. World Tier 5 was a month late, and thus far, 95% of all of the promised DLC content has not shown up. But they have enough fucking resources to develop, implement and maintain a perfectly functioning in-game kiddie gambling factory and churn out new pedo caches every month. There is one blindingly obvious lesson to be learned here. Ubisoft can move mountains when it comes to building infrastructure for taking our money. Ubisoft does not have the time or the resources to fix things we have already paid for. The consensus on loot boxes is now obvious. They are a predatory mechanism for exploiting children, preying on gambling addicts, and covertly facilitating unauthorised purchases on parental credit cards. They're banned in Belgium, being investigated worldwide, age restricted in many territories, and likely to be banned in more regions shortly, including the UK. Only this week, the United Kingdom Parliamentary Report on Immersive and Addictive Technologies stated that loot boxes are predatory, and in the light of the industry's utter failure to self-regulate, is now considering new laws, placing loot boxes under the jurisdiction of the UK Gambling Commission, and introducing new taxation on video games. For fuck's sake. Yeah, you heard that right. Thanks to AAA publishers bullshitting the UK government, we are now potentially looking at legislation and taxation in the UK. Shit like this is like a hostage negotiation. The longer the publishers hold out before releasing the hostages, the longer they will spend in prison. Well, the cops have surrounded the pedo cash factory. It's time for the AAA publishers to put down the loot boxes and come out of the building with their hands up. Ubisoft needs to bite the fucking bullet and actually demonstrate at least a tiny bit of corporate responsibility. They claim to uphold all these fluffy values, yet sell gambling services to children. How about they put their money where their mouth is? The bubble has burst on kiddie gambling. It's time for them to knock this shit on the head. Stop lying about absolutely everything, because you are a bunch of liars. I think a big part of Ubisoft's compulsive lying problem will be immediately solved once they get rid of the entire community management department and all the PR guys. However, I'm sure the culture of dishonesty, overselling, disinformation and propaganda has probably permeated their entire business culture. This jig is up. Nobody trusts Ubisoft anymore. Nobody believes the same lies we have been hearing for years. People are widely calling bullshit every time they hear the same old tired tropes of, "We're working on it, we are listening, that is something we are looking at." My radical suggestion is that from now on, Ubisoft tells the fucking truth. Why don't we have some new tropes like these ones? Sorry, that is broken because we released the game 1 year too early. We haven't fixed that because we're lazy, tight-fisted and hoped you wouldn't notice. And my personal favourite, we lied about everything so we could take your money because we have no corporate sense of morality. It's time they stop lying. Ubisoft as a corporation is starting to earn a reputation as a compulsive liar. Dear Lord, How beautiful it would be if there was a giant FBI sting operation on AAA publishers for their kiddie gambling rackets. The lie detector interviews would be supremely fucking hysterical to watch. Mr. Julian Geraghty, were you aware that Ubisoft targets children with loot boxes and is responsible for causing problem gambling in children? No? Spend some of the huge profits on finishing this pile of fuck mess. This is a win-win, and one of my more positive ideas. Ubisoft's developers get more work. Ubisoft's customers get what they're owed. They might even save the reputation of their brand. Just kidding about the last one. The reputation of Ubisoft and the Division brand is fucked. But seriously, let's apply a little bit of 21 kiloton science to this idea and see if it fleshes out. The Division 2 is a broken pile of fuck. Ubisoft is sitting on a giant mountain of cash. Spend some of that huge pile of money on fixing the Division 2. We all live happily ever after. That right there, that's science in fucking action. I'm not asking for Ubisoft to become unprofitable. I'm asking that they spend a tiny slither of their huge pile of profits fixing the game they told us would work this time around. Think of it as a down payment for atoning for lies. Never, ever use the bullshit rhetoric of limitations on your customers or ETF members again. Ever. Following from Ubisoft's refusal to spend the appropriate amount of money to fix their products, I am sick to death of hearing Ubisoft apologists jibber-jabbering some kind of excuse like, the devs explained to us the limitations of what we could achieve and we worked within those parameters to improve the game. Fucking horseshit. This reminds me of that old Henry Ford saying, you can have any colour of car you like, as long as it's black. And that was effectively a sales pitch. Don't invite people to come and tell you what needs to be done to fix the game and then 9 AM day one lay down parameters, limitations and constraints about what can and can't be done and what is and isn't on the agenda. You cannot simultaneously claim to value people's opinions whilst dictating in advance what those opinions can and can't be. There are zero limitations which cannot be overcome with a fucking checkbook, so they shouldn't bullshit the ETF about it. And Christ, I hope the ETF have the fucking wits not to come back and sell that limitation narrative to the rest of the community. There are no real limitations. They built the whole game from the ground up. If someone mentions limitations, what they're really saying is limitations on what they can either be bothered or prepared to spend money to do. This is not science. Ubisoft's limitations are a measure of willpower and they dictate what they are. It's not some objective standard. Is it really so much to ask that Ubisoft ploughs money back into this game to fix it, given that they made us sign contracts voiding a refund and then served up an unfinished pile of disorganised shit? I reckon not. I in fact would call it an obligation. There are no limitations on what can be done to fix this game. There are only limitations on how much responsibility Ubisoft are prepared to accept for fixing it. And every penny they save now is only going to cost them pounds in the future. Check the subreddit thread on the ETF. They might be saving the pennies today, but the failure of the Division 2 is driving people away from the Ubisoft brand. Don't ever pull a stunt like this ever again. This one is simple. They should take a look at what happened here and in the Division 1 and never do it this way again. When people start working for Ubisoft for the first time, they should have a special training session and they should teach the new employees what happened here so that history will never repeat itself. Once a year, on Bonfire Night, They should have a work party and burn a giant effigy of a live service game. And Ubisoft staff should tell their kids bedtime stories about how naughty kids that sell loot boxes will get a visit from the nasty monster. The nasty monster from the Financial Conduct Authority. Put Ubisoft Leamington and Ubisoft Reflections in charge of the Division 2. They came up with a lot of the good ideas in Year 2 of the Division. They came up with a lot of the good ideas in the Division 2. But, admittedly, Ubisoft Massive nerfed them because they didn't want to be shown up by another smaller studio. Yep, I said it. You see, Ubisoft Massive as an entity has an ego problem, and egos and good decision making can rarely squeeze into the same meeting room. Leamington and Reflections are not criminally incompetent, and they actually care about the game more than fussing about their own reputations. Not all soldiers make good leaders, not all sailors can steer the ship, and not a single person on God's green earth would say Ubisoft Massive have done a good job of managing this project. Even Ubisoft Paris think they have fucked this shit up royally. Put Leamington and Reflections in charge of the Division 2, so we can get on with fixing the game. Never let Ubisoft Massive manage anything ever again, ever. A Ubisoft Paris crack commando team needs to raid Ubisoft Massive in Malmo. It needs to kick in the fucking doors, snatch everyone's PCs and laptops, and really get to the bottom of exactly what the fuck has been going on. Well, I can tell them what's been going on. It's been an orgy of piss-poor management, changing directives, directionless leadership combined with an arrogant presumption that all failings can be covered up using oppressive censorship practices and by having a couple of professional bullshitters slither out in front of the cameras on State of the Game if and when they can put their bongs down long enough to show up. The management and coordination of the Division 2 has been a giant shit pie of incompetence garnered with a thick crust of hubris and PR. I'm sure it looked appetising to many people right up until they paid their 100 quid and took a big bite of shit pie. Ubisoft Massive have some creative minds working there, but I'm not convinced that they could organise a fucking erection in a Viagra factory. I think they became complacent based on the success of the public relations operation during the Division 1 and just thought they could YOLO this motherfucker and just shine on the community all over again a second time, placating us with lies and procrastination. Well, if you use the same antibiotic too often, eventually the bacteria evolves and mutates and develops resistance. I think they forgot that a lot of the players first through the door for the Division 2 would have experienced the full fucking rodeo last time around, and we are not going to fall for the same shit a second time. To quote George Horn, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, then you can eat a big bag of fucking dicks." What the fuck was Malmo thinking? Stop trying to censor everything. Ubisoft Massive seems to think that it can royally fuck up this entire franchise and nobody will notice if they censor the entire community. Their own managers think by blocking accounts on social media they produce the digital equivalent of putting their fingers in their ears and shouting "la la la." The cat is out of the fucking bag. Banning droves of people from the subreddit, censoring and locking threads on the forums, blocking people on social media, banning the mention of certain content creators on your Twitch streams. Thank you for sending me that, Grumps a lot. And hitting channels with copyright strikes achieves two things. Firstly, it makes Ubisoft look pathetic. It makes them look weak and desperate. Secondly, it creates not only evidence of guilt, but literally evidence of an attempt to cover up the current situation and that guilt. At some point there will be investigations into covert marketing in the video game industry. This train is already stoking up steam. A day will come when representatives of AAA companies are in the hot seat, trying to deny their involvement in deception and dishonest advertising practices. It's going to be a bit embarrassing when evidence surfaces of their deliberate attempts to try and cover this shit up. The video game community knows all about covert advertisers now. Maybe it's time Ubisoft Massive stop trying to cover up their involvement using censorship. Frankly, it's drawing more attention to the situation. Don't sell back content as an ETF win. Let's not fuck around here. We are now heading into the back end of year 1 for The Division 2. And for those of us who have paid for the DLC episodes, we feel like Ubisoft is taking the fucking piss. Because they are. So far, our wonderful year 1 content has resulted in a couple of poxy missions that might have once been a good idea before Massive decided to tinker with them. That's it. For the price of a separate entire fucking video game. So far we've got a couple of missions. So far I feel like I have paid the price of 2 video games and received half of one. I mean, screw the DLC, I don't even feel like I've got the finished base game yet. Massive had better not try and finish up a bunch of year 1 undelivered content and try and relabel it and repackage it as an Elite Task Force based result. Frankly, we deserve a free episode on top to compensate for how shit episode 1 is. We need episode 2, episode 3, and then a fucking huge dump of added content too, just for good measure. And they better not just wait till year 2 and then try and charge us for some more content. Ubisoft Massive hasn't even finished unfucking the base game. Chop fucking chop. The clock is ticking. They need to sort this out and start piling content on the players if they want to restore any trust whatsoever. Spoiler alert, the trust is already destroyed and they won't deliver, but at least I can look back and say, I told you so. Regardless, players know it takes time to implement an idea from scratch, build it, test it, polish it and release it. If they chuck out some random crap in the next patch in a few weeks' time and claim that ETF Echo achieved it, people will see through that bullshit and realise it was already in the pipeline. It's taken them 7 fucking months not to fix something as simple as loot drops. Nobody is going to believe that they can introduce sweeping game changes in 3 weeks. I would allow Ubisoft Massive 2 to 3 fucking days if I sent them down the road to get a fucking coffee. And that's only if they bypass legal. Apologise to the entire player base. I think that Ubisoft issuing a formal apology for the way they handled the Division franchise would go a long way to placating the players. I'm not talking about anything too dramatic or humiliating, maybe just like a walk of shame like in Game of Thrones. All of the managers and community development team should put on sackcloth and rub themselves with ashes and be made to walk around E3 2020 whilst all the Division 2 players shout shame, shame at them. Maybe provide some rotten vegetables and some eggs to throw. I'm sure quite a few of the ground level devs would probably be happy to bring some cow shit to throw and join in throwing it probably. I know that plenty of managers from Ubisoft Paris would be desperate to come, and they'd probably show up with boxes of rotten vegetables. For the grand finale, the managers at Massive could get up on stage, kneel down and beg for our forgiveness for all the lies, broken promises, and for taking all of our fucking money for a product that they knew at launch wasn't even finished. I don't think we should be too hard on them though. At least the Division 2 went a long way towards turning the phrase live service game into shit. Seriously, those words are shit now. It's practically a fucking pejorative. So I guess every cloud has a silver lining. Ubisoft has a great concept, fuck tons of money, plenty of skilled and creative developers. They have absolutely everything they need to make The Division great again. There is no legitimate reason for this game not being excellent, other than greed. The core problems with this game are caused by underfunding and understaffing. Combine this with Ubisoft Massive's crushingly incompetent mismanagement of the situation, and you have a recipe for the perfect storm of clusterfuck. Clearly, some of their financial managers and public relations staff are totally short-sighted, but since they don't benefit the game in the slightest, you can just get rid of them. In fact, I think they only serve to make the game worse. They siphon off all the fucking valuable resources to spend on caviar and dresses or whatever the fuck they wear whilst they're dancing around in their piles of money, while the PR department conjures up fake tears and boo-hoos about how they care and they really want to keep the players happy and fix the game. The entire IP and Ubisoft's reputation would be better served with more modest profits and operating without the curtain of deceit. Then they would be judged on the quality of the game and not be able to hide behind the propaganda. If you want a sustainable business model, Ubisoft needs to stop swindling entire cohorts of its own fans. I'm not a rocket scientist, so there's no need to overthink this. Of course The Division 2 is a fucking disaster. Take a franchise famous for snow, dark, underground locations and giant lawless PvP areas, a game that people still manage to love despite its almost overwhelming flaws. Then make a sequel where you get rid of the snow, set it in summer, get rid of the underground and break the dark zone up into 3 different level Care Bear zones and turn chat off so people can't hurt each other's feelings. Then oversell it by telling your customers they need to pay hundreds of dollars for the sequel, but at least this time all the bugs and broken mechanics will be fixed. Then release it even more fucking wrecked and unfinished than the first game. What could possibly go wrong with that business model? Take away a game people at least had some joy playing, remove the stuff people liked, make it even more broken, and then charge them for the privilege of being fist-fucked. People can argue all day about introducing new loot, new gear sets, different PvP ideas and new missions, but until they can get the game itself to work properly, it's just lipstick on a pig. Who gives a fuck about new gear, which might shorten your cooldowns if the fucking revive mechanics are broken anyway? Who gives a shit about new weapons when bullets are disappearing? Who cares about anything if all the players are disappearing? Unless they can make the basic game work properly, who fucking cares about adding more stuff? More stuff that won't work properly. In fact, perhaps the best suggestion I can make is this. Let's just all go back to New York. Just remaster The Division 1 and make it work just like they promised it would. Because you know what? I liked New York City. But this place is shit. But for now, good luck and happy hunting.